The Senate today also grilled Tom Price, Trump's pick for Secretary of Health and Human Services. Among the biggest flashpoints, of course, his past, his personal finances, and his plans to replace Obamacare. Price says the ACA, quote, violated every principle of health care and that he has drafted a replacement plan with a heavy free market approach. He sparred with Al Franken and, again, Elizabeth Warren.
Your FY17 budget proposal also would have cut Medicaid funding that goes to the state governments by more than $1 trillion. Is that correct?
I think, Senator, the metrics that we use for the success of these programs is not necessarily whether the amount of money into it is what we ought to be looking at.
For Medicaid.
What we believe is appropriate.
Do you want me to read you the number out of this?
No, I'm sure you're correct.
So will Tom Price triumph? Joining me now, it's Peter Suderman, features editor at Reason Magazine. Suderman, Computerman, let's run some of these numbers. $1 trillion from Medicaid. Well, it's not the worst thing in the world, is it?
So, look, a lot of the plans that cut Medicaid actually cut the growth of Medicaid, and you still end up spending more year over year. You just spend less more. And so this is, part of it is just how you think of this. But that exchange that you played between Warren and Price really gets to a kind of fundamental question about federal programs and how we think about them, which is, are we judging their success based on how much money gets plowed into those programs, or are we judging their success based on how well they work, based on how well Medicaid does what it's supposed to do for the beneficiaries that it is supposed to serve?
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, I think Democrats, liberals, the supporters of these programs really just look at them as basically on the question of how much are we spending, how much have we spent, and then they decide whether that's good enough. And of course the answer is it's never enough. It's never enough, and there's no end to that.
Yeah, and there has to be a better way of testing whether or not these programs are effective and get to the people who need them most. Let's talk a little bit about Price's program. He has actually drafted the legislation as opposed to other representatives, senators, and those involved in the process who have maybe 5-point plans or white papers. Price actually has a bill. He has something that could replace Obamacare. How likely is that once he moves out of Congress?
So I would say that it's not super likely, and this is a big theme that was in the hearing today, was that Democrats would ask Tom Price, well, are you, is the Trump administration going to keep this or that aspect of Obamacare? Basically trying to get him on the record saying, well, of course, we'll keep all of these aspects, we'll keep Obamacare in place, more or less.
Yeah.
And what Price tended to answer back was that, look, that's up to you guys. This process starts with Congress. It is driven by the legislature. You guys are the ones who make legislation and who decide, who vote on it and then pass it. Price's job is to implement the legislation. And see, there are some things that he can do from his perch at HHS, but the repeal and replace process is going to be driven by Congress. It's going to start in Congress, and it has to move through Congress before the administration can really get going on it.
All right, you've watched the hearings. What grade would you give Representative Tom Price today?
I mean, these hearings are always a little bit tough. I think he did well for himself, and I think that, he's going to have another one next week, and I think that he's going to end up being at HHS.
All right, very good. Thanks so much, Peter Suderman. I appreciate it always.